Yes, welcome to this presentation on Pär Sundström's article from 2018, How Physicalists Can and Cannot Explain the Seeming Absurdity of Physicalism. And before I start, I want to underline that the aim of this presentation being primarily to summarize the main points, but also I want to focus and maybe zoom in on some proposals that I feel rubs the wrong way, and maybe you can help me to find some further arguments and solutions for a even better theory of physicalism. Starting with the definition of physicalism that Sundström uses. Physicalism for means for every consciousness property C, there is some physical or functional property P, such that C is the same as P. And the important thing here is that we have an identity thesis. Something is the same. And from reading Sundström's previous paper, Phenomenal Concept from 2011, I just want to mention that because my understanding of physicalism already entails the phenomenal concept strategy, which make it kind of easier for me to also assimilate this proposal by Sundström. And what we can see here, it is some kind of a monistic but also dualistic relationship. Because how can two different things be the same thing? And this is the problem that Sundström addresses. And so we have now a consciousness property, see. We don't do mental properties anymore. And this means what things are like and can be be like for subjects. And before I think we called it qualia, or what continental philosophy calls lived experience. But the first personal concept C is the same as P. And C are no longer realized by, constituted by, or supervene on, or grounded in P. So why do we have a hard time accepting this thing being identical to itself or something? And just to mention this, because I don't think it's weird that we do errors and wrongs, because in this article only, there was this is how these properties are explained as consciousness properties, conceptual molecule, experiential, demonstrative concept, complete understanding of essence, essence of, phenomenal concept, physical functional concepts, true identity, present interpretation of, evident from your conceptions. We have a lot of linguistic models of these concepts or interpretations. So yeah, to me, it's not weird that we think that we make errors because we do explain them differently. However, one example of this, okay, I got suspicious when I was a kid because people called my mom by her name. And to me, it was like, no, that's mom, it's not that name because to me, I couldn't understand that my mom was the same person with that name. And also, I remember when I realized that the teacher that I had in school also was a mom, and how this new understanding of these, to use this theoretical framework, how these concepts could be the same because the concepts are different. Anyways, how do this relate to consciousness and its absurdity? Because this is the way I understand this consciousness also, like the experience of consciousness is consciousness, meaning there is in a way a non-dualism actually of C is P. The phenomenal concept, what it is like, is in a way the physical property of consciousness. And here it's why it is absurd and why there is such a resistance to this claim. Because how can something first be physical in a way and then non-physical, but still be claimed as physical? And Sundström explains this chiasm in the previous article as well. And to me, this is not really hard to understand, but it's an embodied experience of the conceptual phenomena. But the concept expressed in a representation is hard to understand. There is this grasp of knowing that escapes the moment I formulate it, like I have to get out of the concept to point it out, and in a way reducing it to a physical property P. But no reduction here, because this is physicalism, okay? And there's only one property in a way. Yeah. This is the critique, but also a misunderstanding, maybe. Here is what Sundström does. Sundström's explanation and goal with this paper is to show that the reason we might resist physicalism is because we have this incorrect understanding of consciousness or its physical basis. And the phenomenal concept strategy is just one of the strategies to defend physicalism from challenges and explanatory gaps such as the appearance contingency, how cause and effects work, conceivability of dissociation, like the zombie world thought experiment, and the knowledge argument, the one by Jackson and Mary, the color scientist. So back to the issue. C is P, and Sundström, are quoting Papinau, are saying that it seems absurd to identify conscious states with material states. So we have gone from these now mental, non-physical, to conscious. We don't say physical because it seems kind of unfair to the phenomena. So how can physicalism explain consciousness and or as its physical basis? Because this resistance to physicalism comes from it being false. And I would say that Sundström's argument is because your thinking about things are wrong, shortly. But things come across as puzzling or absurd only given certain expectations of way of understanding or apprehending things. So he presents this thing that he thinks that all physicalists can accept as error explanatory. Like error about first level explains it all. And this is all peculiar resistance to physicalism is fully explained by our having an erroneous understanding of the first level phenomena. And so this means that we understand C and P properties as different still, maybe, which leads to second level error in our way of mentalizing about the phenomena. Like we are doing wrong in our thoughts about these properties, in our theories, thinking about them, and so on. And when we use representations to symbolize these properties, then that gets further on to the third level and fourth level, and everything is just wrong. So if there's some wrong in understanding something in any level, or I do have an incomplete understanding as well, then maybe I don't know it yet. I have not experienced it, I would say. This view is not yet presented in this paper. This is from page 684 if you want to fact check. But from my readings, later readings, the experience is very connected to these properties. So Sundström's main claim is that you cannot think it, so you have to free yourself from it, meaning free ourselves from our perspective, because it is our cognitive constitution that is wrong, the way you think. It's like the fish, this is my own example, but the fish cannot see the water it swims in because our whole apparatus of explaining properties are wrong. And Sundström even goes as far as saying that some elements in our thinking about the identity of C and P are toxic to our mental faculties and cause confusion in them. So if there is some wrongs in the understanding, then that must mean that in the way analytical philosophy works, we can provide conditionals for the thesis. So of course there is a solution, the first level correction conditional and the first level correction or expansion conditional, saying if we were to improve our understanding about the first level phenomena, either by correcting all our errors or by relevantly expanding our understanding of them. That would bring us to a perspective from the point of view which we would have a sufficiently good reason to accept that C is P, and B, no exceptional resistance to this claim. So how can we then think about consciousness in a new way? Page 687, he writes that we need therapy to heal our view of concepts. That, and I quote, neutralizes the toxic, confusion-inducing effects of our thinking about C and P, end quote. And then he introduces his base argument, which he calls the anthropological law, which is more of a reason for accepting the error about all level proposal. And eventually he refers to Loar on page 693 that says that the reason why we have no trouble grasping other concept that at first doesn't seem to be identical is because the phenomenal concept and the physical or functional concept both provide a kind of direct grasp of the essence of consciousness properties. And again, we are at the etymology of grasping, experience, and many of the phenomenal concept theorists have applied to this other idea of why the resistance, and this is namely through the exemplification that our peculiar resistance to C is the same as P is at least partially explained by the fact that the C concept is an exemplifying concept, while the P property is not. And the idea is that phenomenal concepts use instantiations of consciousness property to refer to these properties. And we are again at some referential mechanism. I would say like, oh, we are going close to idealism right now and back to Plato, like, oh, this is not the real world. This is some kind of symbol of the world that is beyond that we can reach. So just bracket that because that's one of my discussion questions. And the question is like the resistance. He also mentions this neural poison. Like, how come we cannot think about this particular property? And our peculiar resistance to C is P is at least partially explained by the fact that the conceptual molecule C is P uniquely has the following neurological explicable but psychologically inexplicable poisonous effect on our belief-forming capacities. We regard the proposition or propositional component expressed by this molecule as doubtful whether or not we have reason to do so. And I just want to point out that the C is P molecule in this quote is actually written like you would write the chemical molecule with like double bindings connecting to the coal molecule. Anyways, just a little side note. Somehow the aim is to like go what is this nature of consciousness, and there's so many options. What are the background of all experiences and the exemplification of in the end, Sundström argues not for the errors we make about consciousness and physical basis, but that this is the most reasonable if physicalism is the case. Then that's why we have a hard time accepting it. So that's the error. It's hard to think about it, and that's why it also must be true. Anyways, my own proposal is this, that we do accept C is P because the experience of it is identical to another one we have experienced. And I would say it is the now, present, the I, and maybe the absurdity itself that is sometimes presented to us as the unknown, as an absent of knowledge, maybe. So, questions here. How is the subject perceived in physicalism? Is this also a first level phenomena? And what are then the erroneous understanding of the I. Because I think there is a problem for physicalism to have this exceptional CP property if they want to stay non-reductional. In a way, physicalism turns to a version of idealism, something beyond the property P that must be found. And do you agree with this, or do you have any more arguments for how this type of physicalism can turn, like, is turning into an idealism, which would not, like, that cannot be ideal, like idealism and physicalism are the opposites in a way. So finally, I want to introduce the embodied physicalism as a way of committing to the non-dual nature of reality and physicalism, but to reframe our concept and understanding of consciousness through phenomenological ontology by bringing back Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty, and Heidegger's being as the I, not just as a machine in time, but as a temporal openness and a system embedded in a world of meaning, and Merleau-Ponty's body as not a thing that has experience, but the condition of experiencing, like this underlying thing for, yeah. This physicalism will account for the body as lived, not just measurable. And what of the concepts from physicalism can I bring with me into this theory? And do you already have objections on why that type of embodied physicalism is not a physicalism? Um, yes, that was that. Thank you.